I keep on popping and disturb. Yeah, so colleagues, then thank you very much for coming to this webinar where we have our guest speaker for today, and then tomorrow we'll have our PhD students or colleagues will be presenting their papers, or they will also be maybe presenting their research studies. So for now, without wasting any time, I would like to call upon Dr. Jia to take us through as the chairperson of the day today. So Dr. Jia, over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Professor Simon, for the welcoming remarks. And I would also like to welcome everybody who is here on board for today's session. And feel much welcome. And today we have our keynote speaker who is going to share his topic, a process of finishing a thesis and publishing articles from it, which I think is very important because our students, our doctorate students, I think all of them endeavor to not only finish their thesis, but also get some research articles out of it. So we are going to go directly to the presentation, and I'm going to invite Professor Mtiane from University of Pretoria to give an introduction of the guest speaker, and then from there we go to the presentation.
Thank you
Professor
very much,
Mtiane.
Dr. Njia. Here, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you so very much. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Spiwe Mtiane, based at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. And I've got the honor this afternoon of introducing the scholar that I respected, the scholar that I worked with when I was still at UKZN in 2009 to 2015. That is Professor Surya Murthy Maestri, affectionately known to us as Murthy. Murthy is a curriculum scholar and a full professor at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. He leads a project titled Higher Education Curriculum and Pedagogic Responsiveness in the context of innovative artificial intelligence, AI. He has previously led the following major research initiatives. The first being the South African Textbook Research Project, which examines the ideological discourses in school textbooks. The second is the Higher Education Pedagogy Project, which is a series of curriculum and pedagogy case studies in selected university, economic and business science programs. His third research project, titled Decolonizing Postgraduate Supervision Towards a Pedagogy of Ethical Care, focuses on supervision practices in the College of Humanities at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in the context of decolonization debates. His latest project as co-investigator is titled Enabling Threshold Concept Development in Undergraduate Economics Students Using Mother Tongue Video Materials. Finally, Professor Maestri has successfully graduated 30 doctoral students and has over 65 peer-reviewed publications. He has served as a guest editor for special editions in leading educational journals in South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know more about Prof. Maestri, you can go to his OSID, which is shown in the flyer that was shared with us. I went there and I didn't finish because there is so much to see or to read over there. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm now handing over Professor Maestri to address us. Over to you, Murthy.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, colleagues. And I'm looking at the list of participants, and I can see some old friends there in the list. Sabelo, Ipani, who I haven't seen, although he's with us, I haven't seen him for a couple of months. Svenelo. So good afternoon, guys, and to the committee. Thank you
Who's on, Prof?
Sharp, sharp. Yeah, colleagues, I want to thank Prof. Becky Koza for inviting me, for having confidence in my ability to be able to do something with your PhD group and with the scholars in the group. I have something to share. The brief was quite a specific brief, and it was also quite open. So he's given me the liberty to just use my intuition and work with the members. So we know that when we work in these kinds of spaces, that the PhD candidates are usually at different points in their journey. Some would be in second year, some in third year, some will be close to completion. So, but will be of benefit to everybody. Even I'm hoping that the supervisors will chip in from time to time to add their inputs. So I'm going to share a document here. So the brief was to help students who are close to finishing or in the final year, and they want to get to the end of the journey. Now, I've developed this document here, and it's just a very simple template. Sorry, can everyone see this here? Just give me a thumbs up or just say yes. Is it
Yes, we
screen?
can see it, Prof.
All right. So this is a very basic document, right? It's called a thesis completion time frame. But what this does is, when you're working with from my experience of working with PhD students, is that there's so much happening. They're juggling so many different chapters, chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they're all over the place. Often they're swimming, many of them drown, and they don't know how to take stock of where they are. I found this to be a very useful document. In its simplicity, it gives you a good sense of how you need to apportion your time in order to finish on time, right? So let's assume now, if you look at the first on the left-hand side, that your target date for submission is the 15th of November, 2025. So the 15th of November, 2025 might sound like a distant time in the future, but actually it isn't when you're doing this kind of work. So one way in which you can get a sense of how many hours you need to get to where you are is to take a typical thesis, right? So a typical structure of a thesis in the social sciences would have these kinds of chapters: the introductory chapter, lit review, and theoretical framework and conceptual framework chapter. Sometimes people split that chapter into literature review and a separate chapter for theoretical and conceptual framework. Then the methodology chapter, and then data chapters. Usually they're at a PhD level. In the social sciences, you might have two or three data chapters. And then the important chapter, another important chapter is the discussion of the findings and the conclusion. So if you have this holistic view of your whole thesis, right? And you start to take stock of where you are. You say, well, okay, let me see chapter 1. How far am I at this point? We've reached the beginning of June. And you can work out for yourself the percentage completion. So I've just done a random thing, and I said, okay, if it's done, we just put it done. Chapter 2. Somebody's got their mic on there. Hey, will you be able to mute them? Okay, let me continue. So if you're working with the literature review chapter, for example, right? We know that this is an ongoing chapter, but you want to get a sense of how far complete, how much of it have you completed so far. So you might make an assessment, right? That complete or 90% complete. Now, similarly with the methodology chapter and all the other chapters in the thesis. So and then you start to hours you think you'll need to get all of this done. Now, often people don't work this thing out. They think, again, 15th of November is it's a lot of time. But if you count the hours, and we know that there are only 24 hours in a day, most PhD students are already holding full-time jobs, or they're lecturers, and they can only have a certain number of hours per day to work towards the PhD. And so you got to find these hours somewhere. This kind of exercise helps you quantify it. Quantify the number of hours you're needing for each chapter. Right, so I will share this document with Becky and he can circulate it to people and you can make it work for you in some kind of flexible way. Now, a common question people would ask would be, how will I know whether I'm 40, 50, 70, 80% complete? Right? So that's a very useful question. Now, the way in which one gets to know that, so as a PhD candidate, you've got to be resourceful, right? So what we say to PhD students when we work with them is, from the very first day, we say to them, in your field, on your very specific phenomenon, the issue that you're studying, in your particular disciplinary home, your subject area, in your academic tribe, in other words, right? You need to have downloaded at least 10 to 15 completed PhD studies that are in the library. These completed PhD studies can come from your own institution, from other established institutions in the country, okay, with reputable departments in which your field you're located, okay. It can come from international examples of good completed PhDs. Ideally, what you should be doing is you should be saying to yourself, in my study, in my discipline, I know that these are the 5 top authors, 5 top theorists in my field. I am downloading their PhDs. They might have done it 15 or 20 years ago. I'm also trying to track down their students' PhDs. So these guys, these people, whoever they are, high-flying people that you have cited in your study, go and track down. The idea is that you want to now benchmark your chapters against what's already passed in your own university, from other universities in the country, and internationally, and more importantly, from the people whose work you're citing. If you can work like that, then you'll have a good idea as to how your work compares with other theses in your discipline, and you can now establish whether you are in the game or not, the level of intent. You'll also establish the level of intensity of the writing, the profile of the writing, the kind of writing that's required. So when you get to this very discipline specific, when you have this very discipline specific thesis on your computer, in a folder, that's your best teacher. That's going to be your best teacher as to what the standard is. And that's going to help you do this fine-grained kind of work right now, at the beginning of June, to work out how many hours you're going to need if you want to finish by the 15th of November. So I'm going to stop there for a few minutes, Dr. Inja, and maybe if you want to take 1 or 2 questions only now before I move on to the next part. I'm hoping people found this a little bit useful. Doctor or Becky, whoever's chairing.
Okay, that's okay, Professor. So we can take 1 or 2 questions from the members. So members, if you have a question, you can raise your hand, or you can just unmute and air your question, please.
Okay, but if there are no questions at this point, then let me move on. Right?
Okay, yeah, I think you can continue, Professor.
All right. If anything comes up in the chat, there you can let me. Huh? Okay. So I'm going to stop sharing this here, and I'm going to now share another document. Okay. Can you see this? Can you see this document?
Yes, we can see the new document.
Okay. So here's this new document. Here's the thesis now from a different angle. Now remember, the purpose of this afternoon's exercise is to help you to bring this thesis to completion. And like I said, you as a new PhD student, as a novice researcher and a writer, it's the first time you're writing this PhD, you're likely to be all over the place. But what a good PhD should be is a coherent document. A coherent document that flows smoothly from chapter 1 to chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to the end. And for a typical social sciences study, at a PhD level, you would expect to have these kinds of chapters here. The introduction, lit review methodology, and the 2 or 3 data chapters, a discussion chapter, and a concluding chapter. Now let's see how does all of this hang together. Now, before we get to see how everything hangs together, within each chapter, at the beginning of each chapter, an introduction. In chapter 1, the introduction is not just an introduction to the chapter, but it's an introduction to the whole study. So chapter 1's introduction will be an introduction to the whole study, and the rest of the chapter will continue to introduce it. And the basic things that we have in the introductory chapter in a thesis would be the introduction, the background, the context, the rationale, the significance of the study, all of that leading and building up to what the research problem, and once you've established the research problem very clearly, and you say then on the basis of this problem, I am now posing the following 2 or 3 research questions. So you're putting all of that in chapter 1. Then you might give an outline of the literature, and that outline of the literature will be an abstraction of what you've got in chapter 2. In chapter 2, you might have spent 30 to 35 pages on the literature review. In chapter 1, you're just giving an overview of what the state of the field is. So it's a high-level synthesis in a sense. And then you'll have a short methodology section in chapter 1, and then you might proceed to outline how the rest of the thesis will unfold. Okay, you'll say expect that in chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you might give a brief explanation of what's to come. So that's your chapter 1. Again, chapter 1, everything that you have in chapter 1 must hang nice and neatly together. It must be nice and flow. You know, this thing that this thesis that we write up, and as we write it, right, it must be a thing of beauty. It must be something that we admire. We put our heart and soul into this. It must come from a deep place. You yourself must feel proud of this work. Now, the thing about writing is that very seldom does anybody get the writing correct the first time. So theses and chapters have to go through multiple drafts. Draft 1, draft 2, draft 3. And this coherence within the chapter, what this simply means is that from paragraph 1 to paragraph 2 to paragraph 3, is there a nice, beautiful flow? Is it a pleasurable read for the potential reader? How do other people in my discipline, how do they write this chapter 1? And once I've read 10 to 15 good PhDs, I can get a good sense on how to shape mine and give it my own flavor. So the coherence comes even within a paragraph. There ought to be coherence. Now, a common thing, a problem with many students is that in a single paragraph, we try to put too many things. So you have too many ideas running in one paragraph, sometimes too many ideas running in one sentence. So you know what the problem with that is, eh? When you have too many ideas in one sentence, you don't do justice to the idea. And sometimes these ideas fight with each other. When you have too many ideas in one paragraph, again, you don't do justice to the idea. Doing justice to it means explaining it fully. So as you go back and you're trying to read coherence into each chapter, you're looking at each sentence. Each sentence must belong. Each sentence must flow from one to the next, to the next, to the next. There should be a nice linking sentence that links one paragraph to the next, one subheading to the next. So you're looking to bring that kind of coherence within each of the chapters. Okay? Then, so once you've done a chapter 1, you'll obviously have a conclusion, which leads nicely into chapter 2. Okay? So you're alerting the reader to what to expect in chapter 2. In chapter 2, now, often when we read introductions, the common mistake is that students want to put a whole lot of different kinds of things in the introduction. The purpose of the introduction in each of the chapters is to orientate the reader to what is coming in the chapter. I'll repeat it, right? It's to orientate the reader to what is coming in that chapter. And you can't make up things, right? And you should be getting your signal from the subheadings. So what are the big subheadings in each chapter? That is what you should be saying to the reader. Expect this, expect this, expect this. Can't be something else. It's got to be those big subheadings. And so the reader knows, okay, I'm expecting these kinds of things. And then you can go back and check, right? Now, probably maybe the most important thing I'm going to say to you for the whole afternoon is what I'm going to say to you now. Everybody ready? So here's the question. What anchors everything we do in a PhD study, in each of the chapters here? What anchors everything we do? What brings coherence to every chapter? And the answer to that is the research question that the study is posing. Research question or the research questions. Everything you write in every chapter must be strongly connected to the big research question that you have. It can't be anything else. So in chapter 2, people, for example, in the literature review, you find people who want to put a whole lot of different kinds of things. And you've got to constantly ask yourself, is this directly related to my study? Two kinds of literature, right? Pertinent literature, anchored by my phenomenon in my research question, in my critical question. And then you get peripheral literature that might be interesting, but doesn't belong. To make that distinction that you have in each of the chapters. Okay? So in chapter 1, you'll have background literature. You'll have contextual literature. In chapter 1, as you set up the that must be backed by strong literature. It can't simply be that you saying this is a problem. None of the stuff you say in chapter 1 you can ever say without supporting it with literature. At this point in the thesis, you don't have your voice is almost zero, but you're making claims, you'll be making assertions, always supporting it with good literature. So that's one big thing you probably already know, that there should not be any opinion. No, there shouldn't be 2 or 3 paragraphs that go by in any of these chapters if you aren't, that's not supported by good references, especially in chapter 1. So you might say one or two things about your own positionality, where you come from and which school you're teaching in. That's the limit of it. Everything else in the chapter, as you set up the rationale, significance, research problem, etc., everything must be backed by literature. So it must be literature, theory rich. That's the expectation of a doctor of philosophy. PhD is doctor of philosophy. I'm choosing to be a philosopher, a thinker. Okay, but I'm standing on the shoulders of the other giants that have come before me. My voice, I'll show you just now where your voice really comes in, right? So your voice also comes into chapter 2, where you offer an account of what's in the field. What's the state of knowledge on my phenomenon? A very tight phenomenon. What's the state of knowledge on this phenomenon? What do we know about this? What are the tensions? And your literature review, in a sense, serves as a big rationale for the whole study, because it argues for where the gap is in the field. That's the purpose of, that's how we need to think about the literature review. And again, everything we put in there should be directly focused on the research question and what the field already knows about it. That's how we must think about it. Okay, and then obviously, if you watch YouTube videos and read books on how to write a literature review, you will realize that there are different ways to skin this cat and craft this chapter, right? And you choose the most appropriate. Again, what's going to teach you? Those 15 PhDs that you've downloaded. That's your best teacher. The methodology chapter, again, anchored by the research question. Now you're saying, what's the design? There's a difference between methodology and methods. Don't use them interchangeably. Ology refers to the study of. Ology, the study of. Methodology, the study of methods. So in the world of research methods, people have written books, thousands of books on research methods. So that broad study of methods is methodology. So at this PhD level, we're expecting you to show some theoretical depth as to the genesis of your methodology and the methods. That all the methods you choose they speak directly to the question that you're asking for the study, and you can argue why these are the most appropriate methods for the study. Okay, then your chapters. So yeah, I haven't really said anything. Now we can do a whole session on theoretical and conceptual frameworks, But I want to just use one quick example, right? And so a theoretical framework is basically the lens or the eyes through which a student, a researcher looks at a phenomenon. Okay? So you could be whatever lens you're using, that theory frames, a theoretical framework frames and shapes how you're looking at your study. Now, people think theoretical framework, and let me go find that theoretical framework. Here's another important thing that you must remember for today, right? Each study, every new study, the researcher develops a unique theoretical framework for that study. I'll repeat it, right? For every new study, a researcher develops a theoretical framework for that study. Within the theoretical framework is the conceptual framework. And the conceptual framework are the key big concepts in the field, key big concepts that you've isolated and you're using that's going to anchor, that's directly related, to your research question. Falls within the big theories. Now, here's another question people always ask. Can I use more than one theory in my theoretical framework? And the answer is yes, of course you can, right? Because we know that in the world of theory, and before we get there, a theory is simply a high-level explanation using concepts and constructs to explain a phenomenon. So if you want to know why is it that there is a high student unrest at historically disadvantaged institutions compared to white institutions, and if you ask people, they'll give you a whole lot of different explanations. And in a way, they're giving you a theory, right? But obviously, it'll be common sense theory. But theory would be tried and tested explanations for why things happen using concepts and constructs. That's what a theory is. So the theoretical framework, we know that in the world of theory now, that there are some well-developed theories that can stand on their own and can make up a theoretical framework. And there are some less developed theories, but might offer good concepts. So what the researcher does then is says, I'm actually going to pull these two theories together, and I'm going to take these concepts from them, and you create your own theoretical framework. You could even have three. All of that depends on the kind of research question you're asking, and whether your work is interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary. You know, the different concepts that you're not just tightly in one space, that actually the way the study is framed and the phenomenon is framed, it's a transdisciplinary study that allows you to bring different theories together. And you as the researcher, now you have to explain how these things talk to each other, how they sit well together, and why they are most appropriate for your study and the kind of question you're asking. I don't have time to get into paradigms, but I'm sure Becky by now, would have taught you guys, explained to you guys about paradigms, right? Because Becky's a specialist there. So let's move on to chapters 4, 5, and 6, which usually the data chapters. Sometimes they're 2 chapters, sometimes they're 3 chapters. Again, the benchmark would be the existing studies from your university and from other places to see, well, how many chapters is usually expected? What's the length of each chapter? To get a sense of how you're going to do yours. And here you're presenting the data and the findings, right? Chapter 7 is what I want to spend some time on today, right? Is the discussion chapter. And very often people don't know what to do in a discussion chapter. Okay, and obviously chapter 8 is the concluding chapter, where you pull everything together. Now let's see how are they linked. In chapter 1, you start promising all of these wonderful things that you're going to do, right? And you told the reader, this is what, expect all of these things. Chapter 8 is where you pull everything together. You remind the reader of what you've done in all the other chapters, and then you offer some kind of concluding thesis. Sometimes people offer a model or whatever it is, that, and recommendations for future research and implications and implications or recommendations for practice and all of that kind of stuff. So chapter 1 ties up with the final chapter. Chapter 2 and 3 connect with chapter 7, which is the discussion. And I'm going to do a whole session with you explaining how that works just now. All right. Chapter 3 is chapter 2, the literature review, ties up, and the theoretical framework ties up with the discussion. The methodology, what you promised here, you gave effect here in the data chapters. But these two chapters, chapter 2, which is the lit review and theoretical framework, talks directly to this here. This is where you're showing, in chapter 2 is where you're showing what the lineage is, the existing extant knowledge in the field. You're saying, this is everything we know up to this point. In chapter 7, you're now saying, okay, this is what I've discovered in my study. Now let me connect it. Let me show how it extends, adds, etc., etc. And I'll do a whole session on that just now. Now, for each of the chapters, you see for chapter 1 here, right? Each of the chapters has got an introduction here. All the 1s, 2s, 3s here. If you just lifted all the introductions up and you created another document, you have the introductions, say the introductions to each of the chapters. All right. That should give you the overall coherence of the study. If I read each introduction, I will know what your whole study is about. So that's how the introductions need to be shaped. The conclusions all obviously synthesize and round up the chapter. It tells us what you've covered and leaves the reader with the big issues that have happened in this chapter, and moves to the next one. But basically, if you were to extract all the introductions and you gave it to somebody without the meat, without the deep contents of each chapter, that individual ought to know, should know quite clearly, or could have a good sense of what your thesis is all about. So the point then is, are you writing your introductions in that kind of way? Are your conclusions being written in that kind of way? Okay. Prof, I can stop for a few seconds and maybe take questions about how to bring overall coherence.
Okay, that's okay, Prof. Members, you can raise a question as Prof takes a breather. If you have a question, please, you can raise your hand or you can just unmute and shoot the question.
If you just excuse me for 1 minute, I just want to get a glass of water. I forgot to bring some water. Just excuse me for 30 seconds.
Can I say something, Dr. Gia?
Yes, you're welcome, Prof.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I've noticed that in the chat there, my father is saying it's a good idea to have those theses, and then you read them in order to introduce yourself into the field of your study. Yes, I think if you look at it today, some theses from different universities are now published online. So you may not even go to the library, and then you can go around and make sure that you bring that particular a particular thesis from that particular university, and then you use it from there. So that will be a good issue that you can use. So, Prof. Mastery, I think I can see in the chat there, one of our colleagues is indicating that there's a confusion between theoretical framework and conceptual framework. Please clarify it if you can. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's say, can I stop sharing this? If I stop sharing this, maybe I can just do a quick example, right? Just give me a second, right? Let me just find something quickly, and I'll show an example. That we can do. It can take us a whole another whole session. Okay. Minimize this. Okay. Can you see the slide?
I think, yeah, is there? We can see it, Prof.
Okay, what's happening there on the slide? The game of soccer, eh? Can you all guys see everyone can see the game of soccer?
Yes, there is soccer
Right.
picture.
It's a picture, yeah, of the game of soccer, right? So let's assume now that in the last 10 seconds, a goal was scored here, right? And we asked different people in the group here, we've got 105, 106 people here, to explain how this goal was scored. Okay? Now, for people that don't know soccer, don't like soccer, they would give a very rudimentary kind of explanation of how this goal was scored. And then they would say one guy would kick the ball to the other guy, was another person tried to block them, and then and there was another guy who was standing between the posts, and then eventually the ball crossed over the line, and everybody started getting excited. But can you see they'll give a very weak kind of explanation out of how the goal was scored, especially if they don't know soccer, they don't like soccer. But we force them to explain, right? Okay. And in other words, they give a very lay, man in the street kind of common sense explanation. But if I took the same thing and we showed the video, right? And we were sitting in a studio, and we had top experts who have been international coaches and players, former players, and they're technical experts. And if we ask them to explain how this goal was scored, surely the explanation will be very different, isn't it? They will use the concepts of the game: left back, right back, full back, center back. They will use the offside rule. They will use the concept of a throw and or whatever it is, that. But the point is that they will give a very, very sophisticated explanation as to how both these teams, the opponents, the strikers, and the defenders worked with one another. They would show. Uh, just one second. Yeah. Can you see the screen? Can you see the screen has changed?
Yes,
Prof?
we can see.
Okay, so what the technical experts will do, they know the game, they know the concepts. They will offer this rich explanation using the concepts of this game of soccer. Okay, so this big theoretical world we're working with here now is the game of soccer, okay, which has its own concepts. So the theoretical framework is soccer. If you think about this metaphor, right? The theoretical framework is soccer. It belongs to the broad world of sport. It can even belong to the broad world, broad world of sports played with balls, okay, with round balls. Because we know there's sports played with round balls of different sizes, like cricket balls are much smaller. So in this world of theory of sport, there's this big world of sport, the meta theories, and then you have theories of sub theories of sports played with balls. Then we're narrowing it down now to a theory of particular sport, which is soccer. And in this theory, to explain how this theory works, there are concepts. And we know that each of these different positions on this board here is a particular concept, a particular role. Okay? There are certain rules for the goalkeeper, where you can stand, where you can't stand. There's certain rules about whether we can tackle the goalkeeper in the goalkeeper's box. And you know this, I mean, you guys know that, right? You can explain all of that stuff. But the big point is the theoretical home is soccer. The concepts come from the theory. Now, we can't bring in rugby concepts here, right? And explain this because they won't work, right? So the conceptual framework is embedded in the theoretical framework. It has to talk to each other like that. If I move to, say, another slide here, right? Can you see this slide? Can you see this slide?
Yes, we can see it. We can see it.
Okay, so this is a cross-section of an engine. If I ask all of you in the room now, guys, take 5 minutes. Explain what happens when I put the key into the ignition of a car, or if this car doesn't have ignition, I just press the button or turn the key and this car starts up. And I engage the gear and this car starts moving. Okay? Can you explain to me what's going on here with all these different parts? Now you might take a chance and say, even there's a fuel tank in the back, and there must be a pump pushing the fuel from there, and it comes to the engine. Something happens there. All these parts work in different kinds of ways, and then we see and the car's moving. Again, that's a rudimentary lay explanation without theory, without understanding the concepts. But if we asked a BMW technician, high-level BMW technician, they write a whole book, excuse me, sorry. This person can explain using the concepts how the different things work. So the conceptual framework is here. Now, what you need to do for your own study as a PhD student is to ask yourself, okay, what's my phenomenon? When I work with the literature review, okay, I'm going to stop sharing this, right? Okay, maybe so let me share something else with you. When I work with the literature review, I am working with the literature review. I'm trying to find the 5 to 6 top researchers in the field. Okay, I'm trying to find out now these top 5 or 6 researchers in the field on my specific phenomenon. What theories are they using? Which theories are they using to study this phenomenon that we're all in, that I want to belong to? And it's from there that you'll get your theories from, that you will bring into to create your own theoretical framework. Now, like I was saying to you earlier, there are some theories that are well established, like Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory. You see this theory it's got 4 levels, the micro, meso, exo, and macro, and they're concepts that he's developed over time that can explain how things work in this Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory. What some students do is that they can take the whole theory and use it, and that's the theoretical framework, and that's acceptable, right? Okay, there's another theory called, okay, Kolb's learning theory, and again, very popular theories. Somebody, Mike.
Vami may need to mute, please. Vami, please mute.
Okay, yeah. So Kolb's learning theory again we've got the theory, and he's offering concepts within the theory. So I'm hoping you can see the difference between the theory and the concepts. Now, when you bring 2 theories together into a theoretical framework, you're bringing concepts from different spaces. Okay, if someone's doing a study, you could actually bring in Kolb's theory and Bronfenbrenner's theory to answer a particular question if they talk to each other. So the theoretical framework is the big home. Okay, conceptual framework are the concepts within. We just do one more, right? So here's a study here by one of my former PhD students. She used a framework. Usually when you're drawing up, when you're trying to put together your theoretical framework for your own study and conceptual framework, if you can do it schematically, offer from the existing literature, you're saying, I'm going to draw on these concepts that's related to my phenomenon, and I'm going to give what I think is going to help me to explain my phenomenon, to investigate my phenomenon. So the theoretical framework influences every aspect of the study. Often people don't pay attention to it. It stands as decoration somewhere as a standalone chapter. It informs everything. It even feeds back to the research question. It's never a linear process. So when one starts a new PhD, right, for example, what the supervisor says, oh, you have a good sense of what the area is, now go and read a bit, right? So the student starts to read the literature. But usually when students read, they're only reading for the findings. But then as a good supervisor, what we should be doing is pointing them to, okay, now you've isolated some literature in a particular field. Go now look at what theories people are using. What concepts are they using to study the phenomenon? And as you do that, you're trying to think about which theories talk to the question you have, and which concepts are related to the question that you want to ask. That theoretical and conceptual framework gives you the eyes, gives you the hooks, because it then shapes how you go into the field. So if it's an empirical study, it tells you precisely what you should be probing, what are the areas of explosion, which ones you need to be pursuing, because the framework is giving you these concepts. You probe each concept. For example, if you have an interview, you say that these are the concepts related to my study. In my interview, I'm going to make sure I am probing, so I'm getting information on them. So the theoretical framework works in that way. It also informs what you put in the literature. So all those studies that have used Bronfenbrenner, for example, should be in your literature related to your phenomenon. Shouldn't come from anywhere else. If you're using Kolb's experiential learning theory, all those studies on your phenomenon that have used must be in your literature. So think about it like that. So the distinction between a theoretical and conceptual framework, very quickly, the theory, for example, is social practice theory. For example, communities of practice. Lots of people know about this theory. Wenger's theory of communities of practice. Okay, it's a broad social theory, social practice theory. Okay, and the key concepts that in theoretical principles, learning is a social act. Learning can be cultivated in social context. Learning can happen in absence. So all of basically these are the principles. And look at the concepts. These are the key concepts that Wenger has provided: meaning, participation, identity, community, brokering. Concepts within the theory. Theoretical framework is the big thing. Conceptual framework, the mechanisms within. Let me do one more. So let's take decolonial theory, for example, right? So there are many variants of decolonial theory. We know that people across the world are writing about this. Its key tenets is a rejection of Western Eurocentrism. That's the key principle of decolonial theory, right? Key concepts, again, colonial matrix of power, coloniality of being, decoloniality, epistemic violence, linguicide, femicide, epistemicide, and a whole lot of other concepts here, right? And again, what you choose depends on what question you're asking. What's the research question you're asking for the study or in your study? Other examples would be like delusion theory, right? I enjoy using delusion as well. And key concepts in delusion theory is deterritorialization, reterritorialization, rhizome, line of flight, immanence, assemblage. All of these are delusion concepts belonging to the theory. For Michel Foucault, the other very popular power theorist, many people use him. Some of his concepts: panoptics, power, discourse, genealogy, normalization, biopower, governmentality, etc., etc., etc. So maybe one last point. I know you asked me one question, but I'm giving you a brief overview of it. What distinguishes scholarly work from lay research is theory. So you remember that story when we started off? I showed you the picture. I said, describe what's happening with the soccer, explain the engine. Because none of you are high-level BMW technicians, you all will give lay theories, right? Because you're not immersed in the conceptual world of that phenomenon, which is the motor vehicle movie. So what distinguishes you as a researcher is to know your theory, know your concepts. So you offer a different kind of look at your data, looking for the data, okay, analyzing the data and your discussions. Network anchors the proverbial golden thread. It brings overall coherence. So look at this comment here. The theoretical framework weaves its required elements into the building process. It becomes indistinguishable from the house itself. What you are left with is a home you call your own. Now, I didn't show you that other part about the house and the home, but very quickly, right? The theoretical framework, if you look at these different kinds of houses, I'm going quite fast here, right? You can see this is a Tudor-style house. This here is a Spanish-style house. This here is a Roman-style house. This here is an Eastern. Each of these houses, when it was built, will have had a plan, a blueprint. The elevation drawing, which shows the outside of the house, that's the theoretical framework. So when you walk into, for example, this Chinese house you would expect that everything in there will be of Chinese decor, eh? All the seating, the floor space, the way things are organized, the cups that they drink from, etc. Everything should be Chinese, given that. So the concepts fall within that, right? The conceptual framework is everything that happens within, right? And in the world of theories, you can see all of these theories. I'll give you 30 seconds. Quickly look and see whether you can see it. But if you want, I can share this with Becky. Okay. The conceptual framework. We saw the elevated framework of what the house would look like from the outside. What the architect had drawn. The conceptual framework is the nitty-gritty of how the house will look and where the bedrooms are going to be, where will the toilet be, where will the light fittings be, how will the plumbing work. That's the conceptual framework, the workings of the house, the workings of soccer, the workings of the engine. You're asking yourself, is my conceptual framework describing the workings of the phenomenon I am investigating in my study? I will stop sharing this slide now, Prof. And if you are okay, I I I can continue. But if you have any further questions, I'm happy to take a question. I know we're going through this quite quickly.
Okay, Prof. I think you have done justice to that distinction between the theoretical and the conceptual framework. There are a number of other questions in the chat. I don't know whether you respond to them now, or maybe you continue to respond to them later.
Okay, you make that call, Prof. I'm happy to go with what you decide.
Okay.
What do you think? The next section I'm doing now is explaining how the discussion chapter works. My focus was just bringing this thesis to completion, right? The discussion chapter is a latter part of the thesis, and it's often a chapter that's not well written. But maybe we can take one question. Let's see, Turu's got his hand up there. Turu, he or she, sorry.
Okay, yeah. Okay, there was one there. There was one from I think Professor Mtiane that you
Yes.
could speak to the CTK in the concluding chapter. The CTK, I don't know the abbreviation CTK, what it stands for, that you could speak about it in the concluding chapter. CTK.
CTK. Maybe just ask him to explain that. Why are you
Maybe
asking hard
Professor
questions?
Mtiane could
Colleagues,
elaborate the CTK. What CTK
colleagues, I'm
stands for.
referring to the contribution to knowledge, especially if a student is doing a thesis.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Okay, I'll pick it up now. Right? Okay.
Sure.
All right. Okay. Turu got his hand up there. Turu, you want to say something?
Thank you. Yes, thank you so
Oh,
much, Prof. Yes,
sure.
thank you very much for this insightful presentation that you are making. I would like to go back a little bit. I'm sorry for asking a question that you've talked. I mean, on something that you talked about much earlier. There's a point where, Prof, you indicated that chapter 1 is connected to the last chapter, which is the conclusion, and then I think you said chapter 2 and 3, 3 being the methodology.
No, not the methodology. Chapter 2 is connected to the discussion chapter.
7. Yes,
Yeah.
to the discussion. Let me just mention the names of the chapters. But
Yeah.
I think there's somewhere where you said the methodology chapter is also connected to the discussion chapter.
I'll show you how just now.
Yes, I'm interested in that one. I wanted to ask you to elaborate on that one, probably with examples, Prof. Thank you.
I'll explain that. All right, let me share let me just open up my folder here quickly. Okay, colleagues, is that visible now?
It's visible. It's visible.
All right, let's move. Right, it's now 5 to 5. Okay, let's see how far we can go. All right. So the discussion chapter, you saw now in that Excel spreadsheet that I showed you where the discussion chapter fits into the whole thesis, right? Now in this discussion chapter, in this discussion chapter is where your voice comes alive. Yeah, it's about you having read all the literature, knowing your theoretical framework really well. And I want to repeat that, right? I'm not using these words lightly. You knowing your literature really well. You know, when people, I find when some students do their PhDs, they just write up the literature review. They simply document it, but they don't know it. They just write up the theoretical framework, but they don't know it. This literature review is a careful explanation of everything we know already on the phenomenon. And you've got to know it, you've got to internalize it. You must be able to stand up anywhere and say, at this PhD level, on this phenomenon, these are the 6 big writers. These are the key things they sing. This is where they agree. This is where they fight or they disagree. But that's the level of knowing that you need to have in your head. Here's a theoretical framework for my study. I'm drawing on these theories, and these are my big concepts. You should have it up on your wall in front of you, okay? And so you've got all of that in your head. All of that is going to help you think about how you will discuss your findings. In the absence of that, if you don't have it, then what's going to happen? You're going to explain, like how we're explaining soccer and how we were explaining the engine, because we're not specialists. You'll end up, your discussion chapter will end up being like that. So we need for you to really do a powerful discussion chapter, you need to go. In fact, one of the things I say to my students is, before you start to do your analysis, go back and read the literature review chapter. Go back and read your theoretical framework chapter. Know what's in the field. So when you're doing the analysis, all those things will pop out. You will say to yourself, hey, I'm finding this here in my study, X and Y already found it, and you'll make that link immediately. And you make the link to your theoretical framework. Now you're holding all of those things, you're making notes somewhere else because you're going to bring it into your discussion chapter. So can you see how important it is for you to just not do this in a superficial way, knowing your literature, knowing your theoretical framework in a deep, rich way is where you need to get yourself to. So very quickly, obviously, I'm not going to go through the session overview. All right, okay, I'm going to skip all of this here. Let me move a little bit. So let's move on. Now, in chapters 3, 4, and 5, sorry, in the chapters preceding the discussion chapter, you would have presented the results or the findings. Now, again, you need to know as a PhD student, what are the terms and the concepts that are used in my discipline? Which paradigm do I belong to? Within my paradigm, there's a particular discourse and terminology and concepts that are unique to my paradigm. Sometimes I might make a mistake and I might slip up. I might bring some other concepts from a positivist paradigm in, and usually that happens with novice research. Pay attention to your paradigm, pay attention to the concepts, and you're going to stay nice and tightly within it. Okay, so the discussion chapter. So that little explanation that comes from whether you call it results, whether you call it findings, whether you call it themes, or whatever it is. Go to your discipline, find out how does your discipline, what names do they give for this? But the big thing difference is, what did I find? And you presented the data, presented the evidence, and you name the findings in your data chapters. The discussion chapter, on the other hand, takes it one step further. What you're doing is you're now moving to a higher level of abstraction. What abstraction means, when something is abstract, it means you're moving away from something that's concrete. In the findings chapter, you presented concrete evidence. If you were doing interviews with students about student unrest, you would have excerpts from the interviews, from the transcripts as the evidence, and you'll say one big finding is NSFAS is in a mess. I'm just making this up, right? And you've got data that says this, that the students are talking about how they're struggling to buy food because they have to wait for 3 months, etc. So you've got real data, concrete data in the data chapters. When you move to the discussion chapter, you're now leaving that data behind because you already presented the data. In the discussion chapter, you shouldn't be introducing new data. You're now simply lifting the findings into the discussion chapter. And you're answering this question: what does it mean and why does it matter? What does it mean? What does this thing mean? Why does it matter? Now you're reading meaning. The discussion and the further high-level analysis and interpretation is where you're reading meaning into the findings. And let's see how this is done now. So what should this chapter do then? So it transforms the data into insights and understandings. So we've already presented the data in the data chapters. Now we're developing some insights. Now that we know this about what students are saying about that fees and the inefficiency of the allocation process. Now you can start to read meaning into this here. So what does this mean? Right? You can offer insights. Then you say, okay, you can connect it now to the broader theoretical framework on there might be theories of student funding in underdeveloped contexts. Okay, so what are the concepts within those theories? And you're going to connect it to the theory and to the concepts. What this chapter also does is, this is where the question CPW was asking, where you show how your work fits into the lineage. What's your contribution? So in the literature review chapter, we showed everything that we know up to this point. In the data chapter, you showed your findings. Now you're connecting your findings. Oh, these are the new things. Now, A, B, C, D, these are the new things. So that's your contribution. And what's required here is you've got to show some analytical sophistication, some thinking, scholarly thinking. Doesn't come naturally to everybody, right? Who's going to teach you? You're reading other discussion chapters, reading whole theses to get a sense of how people write this thing. We move on a bit. Okay, so what your discussion chapter must accomplish, all these big things, right? Interpretation. You explaining the significance and the meaning of your findings. Why are these findings so significant? What can we learn from it? Right? What does it really mean that students have to wait for 3 months? What does it mean for housing, for nutrition, for concentration? So you're reading meaning into. I'm just making this up as I'm speaking with you, right? But you already have a good sense of what somebody else has already said, eh? Because it's there in your literature review chapter. Your theoretical framework is also giving you ideas and your conceptual framework as to how you can explain these things. So now you're explaining your findings and you're giving deeper meaning to it. Okay? The contribution, you're going to say what's new and what have we learned now? You might well say, okay, theories of student funding have been mainly conducted in the West, where these are homogenous societies, middle class societies. In developing country contexts, we have populations that are 70% that live below the bread line. Many students come from families, the first generation students. So you can bring all of that literature stuff and you can show what do we know about this particular context. Students, what new concepts can we give the world about that? Now, while I'm on that one there, let me tell you something else very quickly. Okay? And it's a common problem. In the data chapter and the findings chapter, be bold. You must conceptualize the findings. Now, what this means? What does this mean to conceptualize the findings? To conceptualize the findings means to name the findings, to name it precisely. To name it precisely means that a way to think is like I'll give you an example of a vague naming. Let's say I'm conducting a study on students at universities, and student fees came up as a big issue. And in my data chapter, I only have a very short the name for the finding. I call it student fees. what we see there is that that does not tell us enough. You need to qualify it. What is it about student fees? Okay. And then you might qualify it if the data is saying it. Student fees lead to anxiety and distress. Student fees have the potential for dropout or whatever. So you're qualifying it, but you're speaking precisely to what the data is saying. You're conceptualizing the findings. You're creating new concepts. That's what you're doing. That's what a PhD is. You expect of a PhD, that you create a new concept. Okay? And then, when you create and you name this concept, and if you the way to think about whether your naming is accurate is to ask yourself, okay, what is it about student fees that I need? What is it about student fees? So you say student contribute to this, and you name the finding, right? Think about it this way: that in 2 years' time, if somebody will and cite it, they will say, Quasar 2025, in his study on student unrest across campuses in South Africa, found that. What did Quasar find? Quasar didn't just find student fees. Quasar found that student fees X, 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 X. Are you guys understanding what I'm saying? About why you need very precise, clarified explanations, like almost a nice phrase that catches the finding. Now, and that becomes your contribution. That becomes your conceptual contribution to theory. You've named it. People cite you, they're naming you, and they're naming your finding. Okay? Contextualizing, position your work within existing scholarship. Again, how does it fit in with what we know already? Integration, synthesizing it into coherent insights. What can we, so now that we've said all of these things, what else can we learn about this? How can we take this thing forward? Yes. Okay. And reflection, I'll give reflection and future direction, right? For research. There's a question that came up early on about methodology. How does a methodology chapter link to this, to the discussion chapter? And here in this chapter, the discussion chapter, you address the methodological limitations. And what did your particular methodology allow you to do? What were its shortcomings? Had you used or changed the methodology? How might the findings have been different? And you do this in a way without undermining your study. You can't do it in a way that like shoots down everything in your study and you say, oh, these are all the limitations with the study. Don't take that kind of position. You're being reflective and you're saying these are the limitations, the methodological limitations, and these are the possibilities. And you can even point to how on the same phenomenon you could research, the same phenomenon could be researched using a different theoretical approach or adding another methodology that might answer another question. Okay, so let me move on a bit. I see a hand came up there.
Yes, if I may ask, please.
Go ahead. Give me a second. I just want to put my light on you. But you
Okay.
get on, I
Is
can hear
it
you.
all right. Is it advisable to use more than two theories?
It's a good question, right? Is it advantageous? Is it possible? Can we use more than two theories? Now, there's no textbook answer for that. There's no right or wrong answer. You could use one theory, like I showed you Bronfeld and Brenner's theory. It's a well-developed theory. It's been tried and tested and modified over time. Those people are working in technology. They know we have the TAM models, the TAUT, technology acceptance and utilization model, etc. Then you have UTAUT, right? Whether you're using one, two, or three, everything we do, every choice we make must have a sound academic reason behind it. What's the academic reason for appropriating two or three theories or from two or three theories? Is my work transdisciplinary? Is the one theory not sufficient to be able to give me the lens that I need to answer my research question? And it's on the basis of this academic argumentation for more than one theory. But you shouldn't apologize for it. Your job as a PhD student is to explain how they talk to each other. how they cohere,
Okay.
how the concepts cohere. Does it help you?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. All right, let me move on a bit then, right? So when you're starting off this discussion chapter, you're starting the beginning of the discussion chapter. You're re-establishing the context. You're just briefly reminding the researcher or the reader what were the research questions that the study sought to answer. What were the big findings? And again, you don't want to be too repetitive, right? Just be careful about that. And in the introduction, remember we said a good introduction to any chapter gives like a kind of roadmap to what's coming in the chapter. So you offer the reader a roadmap to how you're organizing the findings. Okay. Okay. So the core analysis section of the thesis, sorry, of the discussion chapter. You've done the introduction. Now you're moving into the core analysis, and you can see this is the heart of your discussion. This is where you come alive as a researcher. This is where your insights, your thoughts, all that reading that you've been doing for 3 years is all going to come to bear on your own findings, right? So you might organize the discussion thematically, but be careful. Do is simply say, okay, I have three data chapters, and you're going to take them like almost in a linear kind of way, from one into the discussion chapter, two into this. What people do is they say, okay, in my 3 data chapters, I've got 12 findings, which I've spread across the 3 data chapters. Let me see. They try to group them. They try to group some of the findings. So I've got findings 1 to 12. They might say, okay, when I look at it, 1, 4, and 7 could go together, and they pull it together and they give it another name. Remember that when I spoke to you about further levels of abstraction, this is an example where you're pulling 3 things together from the data chapter, combined name. Now, in the world of writing, there's something called a concept and a construct. The concept is a smaller animal. The construct is made up of smaller concepts. Okay, that explains the construct. So that's what you're trying to do. You're going to move from these findings as individual findings, isolated. You're trying to pull them together and create something new out of, again, only you know your data, right? This is what you should be saying to yourself is this is the original stuff that's going to come through. No one else in the world has my research question, my data, the context that I worked in, did the field work the way I did it. No one has it. No one has analyzed it the way I've done it. My findings are mine. This is my stuff. This is where I'm coming. This is the originality. This is, and you're going to argue for this thing, right? So be clear, be assertive, be bold, but not overconfident. So you can explain what each finding means in relation to theory. To theory means the existing literature. Address the so what question. So I found this thing out about student fees. So what? I need to expand on it. Avoid leaving things implicit and leaving it to the reader to make up their mind as to, oh, okay, this could mean this. You explain it fully. Okay. And you're connecting it to what other people have said. Okay. Pay attention to unexpected findings. Now, that for me is where the newness comes in. So what we find in many theses is that students they have certain findings, 1 to 7. They say, I found 1, Smith also found 1. I found 2, Naidu also found 2. I found 3, Kacheni and Rover also found 3, right? And it's like a linear kind of, I found, they found, and it's like a confirmation kind of thing. That's too static, too linear, too mechanical. Okay, it's got to be a more organic kind of discussion. Okay, and when there are new things that come up, that's where the newness comes in. If there's nothing that's existing in the literature, something's completely new. That's what you should be milking and presenting as the new stuff. Then you're connecting to the broader social cultural context. So if you're doing studies on universities or teaching, etc., or whatever field you in a particular social cultural context, what does it mean for those contexts? You've got to offer some explanations. The theoretical framework again comes to bear here. that particular theoretical framework is in a way, when you drop the theoretical framework, it's like a high-level hypothesis in a sense to explain what you expect to happen. That's what the theoretical framework is, and the conceptual framework. It's like that's like thinking in advance of how this thing could be, and you're getting the theoretical framework from existing literature and the concepts. Now you're going back and saying, well, okay, these are the concepts that existed there, and these are the concepts in my theoretical framework. You can extend them, you can challenge them. Okay? Then the key question for each finding, how does this finding advance, challenge, or complicate our understanding of this phenomenon, this topic, this issue? Those are the things you should be thinking about in this discussion chapter. How does my work, my findings move the field forward? Explain it. How does it challenge what we know about funding and about finance and about students? How does it complicate our thinking about students and money and finance, etc., etc.? The fact that students in developing country contexts, many of them take a lot of their monies and they send it back home because people at home are waiting, or people at home aren't eating and they feel this sense of guilt. So it complicates the rational Western ways of thinking that using it. Okay, so I'm saying go to the literature. There might be already people that already said this. Yeah, you will find that. Synthesis and integration. So the skill here this is where you demonstrate your ability to think holistically. So yeah, I've got these multiple findings, 12 of them. Now, but I need to not leave them in isolated silos. I have to show how they talk together, how they work together to give me answers to the big research question. So that's what the synthesis in a discussion chapter. Okay, so it's moving beyond the fragmentary kind of each finding. You will do that, but you'll also bring it all together and show how these multiple answers that you've got through your data, these multiple explanations, give us an explanation and an answer or answers to the big question, the big research question. So you're looking for patterns. How do different findings work together? What are the overarching things that are coming up with the study on students? Okay, the point we made already. How are the research questions being answered? You want to build coherent arguments, right? Moving from individual findings to broader understandings, but all fitting nice and tightly around the kind of question you're going to ask. You've been asking. So you can see clearly that this kind of writing just doesn't just happen like that. It requires a lot of thought. You're never going to get it right the first time. You also say to yourself, I need to know the literature. I need to know the theoretical framework well. And you can see it requires complex thinking. Now, we're not asking you to make things up. Everything you say and you're discussing here, you can't just make things up. Everything must be led by the data itself. You've already presented the data. Okay? But whatever you're discussing here has to be, you can't make up new things now and bring new data and move to a completely different finding that's not even in your data. Right? Make sure you remind yourself about that. Positioning within the literature, again, when we speak about the lineage, we say here's a line of there's a history of research on this phenomenon. This is what's been going on. These are the current debates. This is where I'm coming in. So strategically engaging with, comparing and contrasting to existing studies, contrasting your work, your findings, to what's been said already. You might point to discrepancies in the methodology that other studies might have used. Previous studies might have been purely quantitative work, or they might have used a particular theoretical framework, maybe a Western framework or an interpretive framework. You've used a critical framework, for example, right? And you're pointing to, well, okay, in a modest way, which gap do you think you've addressed? Okay? And how have you already know about this particular issue? Let's move on a little bit. The 3 types of engagement for when you're working with this here: either confirming, supporting. That means you say my findings support existing theories. and you're confirming it, right? Questioning established views. That means you're now challenging what people are saying about what we know. And again, that challenge has to be a very careful challenge. You can't be going around trying to slaughter and axe and butcher the work of established researchers. You've got to treat those established researchers with respect. Okay, there's a way of doing it, in a conservative way. Because you've got to remember, as a PhD student, that your thesis goes on to the experts in the field. And the way I work with my PhD students is I say to them, okay, towards the end, like around about now, I will say to my student that wants to submit, say in October, give me a list of 10 theorists and researchers you've been using intensively in your study. And they give me the list. I now write to those people across the world and I say, I have a PhD student that's going to finish their study in October. Are you happy? Are you willing to be an examiner? This student has used your work intensively, and I think you're well positioned to examine this thesis. And very often people come back. I national examiners, I've done it like that, even local. Sometimes I've had 2 international examiners. So the big point then is, you as a student, the PhD candidate, you got to know that work. You've got to know the work of the people that you've cited and you've used, because it might well go out to them. So when I tell my students that, immediately now they're sitting up and thinking, oh, prof, like they're getting a little bit worried. That means you have to use that work carefully, that you're representing that person's ideas accurately, right? So what you're going to do here then is, you're building on prior work, you're positioning yourself as a thoughtful contributor to ongoing scholarly debates. Now, often we ask students, okay, why are you doing this master's or this PhD study? And they don't know why. They haven't worked out that identity, that researcher identity, that scholarly identity. When one does a PhD, you're saying, I'm choosing to be a thinker. I think the kind of research work I do will advance the field, and I can contribute to the kind of rigorous work I do. So you're a thoughtful contributor. Thoughtful contributors know what the conversation has been already. Like when if you just walk into a room and 3 or 4 people are already talking, right? You might know them, but you won't just jump into the conversation. You'll hold on and try to figure out, well, what are they talking about? Are they talking about Trump and the ambush in the Oval Office? Or are they talking about the soccer over the weekend? You'll wait to hear what's being said, and then respectfully you will join, and you'll offer a perspective. In research, it's the same thing. There's already been these conversations about your phenomenon. You're not the first person to discuss it. There's already people who are fighting each other about your phenomenon. There's people that agree. You're now joining it in a thoughtful way, as a thoughtful contributor. And your thoughtfulness and the fact that you can contribute is based on the powerful evidence you presented in the data chapters that support that these are the findings. These are genuine, real findings supported by good empirical evidence. Implication section, why your research matters, theoretical implications. How do your findings contribute to existing theories, challenge current frameworks, and you might even suggest new theoretical directions. Practical implications. So in your recommendation sections, and in this chapter, you might talk specifically. So if your study is on mathematics teaching, you might have very specific offerings for mathematics teachers. Even if you're studying, say, student fees, and you picked up issues with, say, the protocols or the mechanisms, etc., you might offer practical mechanisms for how they might enhance the student fee or the NSFAS system or whatever it is. You might be careful. You'll also make some insights and offer some insights for policymakers and institutions. Again, here, be conservative, be gentle, don't be too over the top, right? Because very few PhD studies have actually changed policy. Don't say that this study will change policy. Hedge your comment. Say something like, the findings of the study are likely to, that kind of word, right? You can see where all of these possible contributions in terms of the practical sense. Methodological implications. Consider how your approach offers insights for future research design and methodology. So you will talk about your methodological approach and what came to the fore given the methods you use. And you could also talk about, well, had I supported this qualitative study with a small scale quantitative study, or this quantitative study with a quantitative study, then these are the possibilities. So you can draw out those possibilities for methodology. So you're giving some insights, right? About what could have been new findings. Future research directions, opening new pathways. Again, don't be vague. Right? Don't say there's likely to be new research, or be specific about the research questions and approaches that people in the future might ask, or future researchers might ask in extended studies. And again, all of this must come from your existing findings and from your and the limitations of your own study. You can't make these things up. What innovations do you think you might offer the world? What new theoretical directions do you think a study of this phenomenon could benefit from? And we spoke about practical applications. And again, avoid generic, more research is needed. It's like it says nothing. Key question: what new avenues for investigation does my work open up, and how might they be pursued? All right. Effective writing strategies. Let's spend a few seconds here, right? So we're talking about crafting, compelling analysis. You see the word here, crafting. If you think about a craftsman usually somebody is making something. He or she's making something out of something, whether it's somebody's making a dress or working with wood or whatever it is. These people usually, there's a deep love for what they're doing. They're crafting something of beauty, something admirable, something, something when other people look at and they draws attention. This is how you need to be thinking about your own PhD. It's got to be this compelling, beautiful thing to read. People must look at it and read it. The examiners must enjoy reading it because there's so much of flow and all of that stuff. You've paid attention to it. So in terms of analytical depth, you're moving beyond surface interpretation. We've seen surface, in the world of analysis, you've got level 1, level 2, level 3. There are YouTube videos that explain all of these things, and I don't have time here, right? But beyond simply descriptive analysis, you're going deeper to explore underlying patterns. You could explain how you use your theoretical framework consistently, or you're going to use your theoretical framework consistently, right? In the analysis. The theoretical framework and the concepts in there must always be talking to how you're discussing the findings. And you're connecting to broader concepts that you had in your own theoretical framework, or that might exist out there in the literature. Be confident about the communication, but you're going to balance being overly assertive, so don't come across too strongly. Stay true to what your findings are saying. Okay, so just be careful about it. Your language must be precise. We know that in academia, every word means something. Match the claims to the evidence strength. That means don't make overly bold claims where the evidence is not strong. Right? So the claims must match the kind of evidence that you're leading. All the way through, you're maintaining a scholarly voice. You're thinking like a scholar, like an intellectual. When one does a PhD study, you're becoming an intellectual. You're saying to yourself, when I finish this PhD on this, I am the foremost expert on this particular phenomenon. There might be other professors in the world and locally that are doing this research in this field, but on this particular phenomenon where I found the gap, I'm the expert. So that's where you need to position yourself. An expert on the phenomenon, say the Department of Education or some national office, and they're looking for people who are working in this field on this phenomenon, your name should come up in the short list of 10. That this is the most contemporary work on this here. You should be thinking about publishing, which we're going to come to next. Prof, I'm not sure whether we're going to get to the publishing story, but let me just see, right? Creating connections, we mentioned all these points here before. Common pitfalls to avoid with the discussion chapter. You're simply repeating the results that you presented in the data chapters, then you are going to run into problems. You're going to move beyond level 1 description to some kind of interpretation. Interpretation means reading meaning into something. Reading in meaning into what people are saying in common sense language. I'm reading the deeper subtext of what is being said. Often people ignore unexpected findings. Pay attention to that. Weak literature engagement, go beyond surface level comparisons. Now, a big problem here that I've examined many PhDs in my time, and other colleagues in the room will tell you the same. That we know the discussion chapter is likely to be weak if the literature review and conceptual framework and theoretical framework is weak. If that is weak, then you can expect the discussion is going to be weak. Right? So you see how these things talk to each other. Don't overstate the implications of your findings. We made that point. Be careful about undermining your entire study. When you're addressing the limitations, when you're speaking to the limitations, be strategic. You don't want the person to read all these limitations and say, "Ish, man, this person doesn't believe that the study is worth it." Don't go down that route, right? Be careful. Maintain the focus on research questions, the analytical thread. Everything you do, every chapter, across the thesis, anchored by the research question. So look at this here. The discussion chapter is where you demonstrate your growth as an independent scholar. Okay, we made all these points before. So I'm not going to repeat any of this. Look at this point here, write with confidence. Now, I'll maybe spend a few minutes talking about writing, right? So this discussion chapters, you should be telling this compelling story, right, about what the research reveals, about whatever your phenomenon is, while maintaining the rigor and objectivity expected in academic work. So you're telling this compelling story. These are the new findings, connecting it to literature, expanding, refuting, complicating what we already know. Now the thing about writing, okay? You know, Becky and I ran a workshop last week with a whole group of 151 students. And one concept that we drummed into them from the word go, from the very first 10 minutes that we spoke with them, right through the last 10 minutes, it's about how they construct themselves. And if you ask students what they do, some of them, if the academic staff members, they say, I'm a lecturer. Some will say, I'm a researcher, okay? But very few, in fact, nobody constructed themselves as a writer. So I'm wondering whether the 105 odd people, 113 people in this room, how many of you construct yourselves as writers? To do PhD work, you have to be a writer. You have to wear the writer's hat. And what do writers do? They write. How often? They write every day or almost every day. They develop this writing. As you keep using the writing tool, it becomes sharper. When you want the writing tool, you know, like you have your tools that you're working with in your garden or whatever it is, or whatever tools you have, and if you neglect them and you throw them outside, they get rusty, or when in the space that you store them, you can't find them, the tool's not ready, you can't work because you've neglected it. Think about writing like that. For academic people working in academia like us, researchers and research supervisors and academics, writing is your most important tool. Keep it handy, keep it sharp. The more often you use it, the sharper it becomes. But if it's, like we said, if it's far away and you call upon to write, hey, then you're fussing and you're like, it's like there's all of these blocks. But if it's sharp and it's a well-oiled tool, you pick it up quickly and you will write in a natural way. Academic writing itself is not, no one's born an academic writer. You learn the skill. There are no born academic writers. Some people have more flair with writing, but not everybody is an academic writer. You have to learn that. Prof. Becky, I've been coming off a heavy flu. It's been a heavy week for me, so I'm not. I don't think we'll do the article writing stuff today, right? If you don't mind that, but maybe you can invite me
Okay.
on another session on how to craft an article out of a PhD. Or if you really want it, I can maybe spend 15 minutes. But let's I thought maybe we can spend time talking about this discussion chapter and maybe having a few discussions. And it would be nice to hear from the other senior colleagues and junior colleagues in the group in the room here about their thoughts. I've given one version of the discussion chapter. Remember, this is not a textbook. It's not a template. These are just these are heuristics. Heuristics means it refers to these are thinking tools to help you think about how you would write your own discussion chapter. Your best teacher are the discipline specific discussion chapters that are already there in the library. Once you read again 10 to 15, you have a good sense of what the discussion chapter should look like in your discipline. These are generic kinds of ideas about what that should be. Hey?
Yeah. I think, Prof, it's good. We can open the floor for discussion or questions or comments because I've seen quite a number of them. So our share will then take care of that. But I think the most outstanding one was that of what is the connection between research objectives and research questions. I think if we can address that, then we can go to other topic for discussion. Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to put Prof. Shlalele on the spot here. Dipane, you going to help us here, bro? Brother? The difference between research objectives and research questions. Dipane or anybody else say?
I can't see him now. Maybe
Okay.
we can ask Professor Orador, Professor Orador from Kenyatta University. I've seen
Go
that
ahead,
he has
Prof.
written something on the chat.
Sure, go ahead.
The connection. Yeah, Prof. John Orod.
Thank you. I think I want to start by saying that the conversation has been very exciting, educative, and at least for the PhD students in the room, they have benefited a lot. While I'm being tasked to give some thoughts around connectivity between objectives, research questions, and hypotheses, it is also important just to mention at this point about, because I know many students in this room might get a bit, not really confused, but rather the clarity around what the presenter said, that the discussion chapter is chapter 7, but I wanted to bring to your attention that some universities have only 5 chapters, for example, where we have chapter 1 to give the introduction, chapter 2 to give the literature review, chapter 3 to deal mainly with the methodology, chapter 4 combines the findings and discussion, and then chapter 5 gives the summary, conclusion, and recommendations. Now, so in that context, then, we find that we may not really be talking just about chapter 7, but maybe the findings chapter. And also we may need to note that at that same point, the universities or departments that combine findings and discussions still will have to move around what you have given us in terms of advice. That the chapter, after you present the findings, then we have to discuss those findings so that we contextualize it to the literature and we identify the extent to which there is harmony, there is support, there is maybe some conflict, opposition, and then the way forward. So that's very important in that narrative, chapter 4. Maybe that is normally called combined with the findings and so on, for those who don't expand the chapters beyond 5. I also, of course, noted that yours was a bit also different in the sense that you have almost 3 finding chapters, like, for example, chapter 4, findings on dataset 1, chapter 5, finding on dataset 2, and then 6, finding on just dataset 3, and then combining to see the discussion of all those 3. There are so many schools of thought. Some might want that objective 1 is given finding and discussed so that we dispose with it at that point. Then we see how to make a reconciliation towards summary, integration, how they integrate. But again, that's for another day. Also, we need also to be very clear when we are talking about how we give our presentation of findings. It may not be a fit-all situation because, for example, if you are doing mixed methods, then you might be dealing with the data analysis at 2 different levels. Like if you are doing explanatory sequential design, then you are giving the quantitative findings, you are giving your descriptives, means and standard deviation, then you are giving your correlations and analysis ANOVAs and so on. Then you want to look at those key findings to now understand them. And then now you constitute the qualitative component, which now explains the quantitative. So again, you can see that that sequence of events might not be a realist one way. You cannot say that there's just one way of interpreting, but we end at the same point. Because even if you are doing the mixed method, you are trying to understand the quantitative so that it's explained by the qualitative. Then you want to integrate the 2 to see where the interconnectivity, so that you see the contextualization, the merge, and so on, the way you have put them very clearly, and then your contribution. So with that in mind, then I just want to make it, because if I start again on a whole chapter to talk about objective purposes, really a study, after you have your problem, of course, then you must have the purpose of which you get your objectives. The objectives are actually clearer. They bring the purpose to clarity in terms of maybe 1 or 3 issues that you want to bring that. So you ask questions around those objectives to see whether more clarity can come in. In fact, what most of our postgraduate students might be missing out is just giving a section on hypothesis, on objectives, and then another section on research questions, but they are merely transforming the objective into a research question. So they are not giving the searching aspect of research question, because the research question should really go beyond the objective so that it explains the objective very well. Again, at that point, we may need to also be very clear, because you cannot step into step 3 of hypothesis, for example, if your study is not lending itself to data that can lead to a hypothesis test. So again, I want to maybe, I can be wrong, those are my thoughts, that not all studies might reach a hypothesis level, but even if they reach that, the rigor of the hypothesis might be a bit different. So we want to see the linkage between the purpose, the objective, the research question, how it lends to that, then how it links now to testing those constructs in terms of hypothesis. You set your null hypothesis at a particular alpha level, and you want to see how to test whether you reject or accept, and so on. So that's, again, that rigor is what I don't know we should push these postgraduate students into that direction. But maybe the organizers are here. If they want a more detailed exposé on that, then me and you can probably arrange for another session, and then we now bring that even to more clarity. But for now, I want to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. I'd love to work with you. As you speak, I can hear the deep and experience that you have. And the big point Prof made there was that there's no one recipe. and it depends on the paradigm that you're choosing as a student, whether the quantitative methodology, whether you're using mixed method, whatever it is, you're finding that space, you're finding that paradigmatic home, you're finding done this kind of research and you're learning about how it's done. The other big point Prof made was that in some institutions, even with some journals, as the data and the findings are presented, the discussion happens like simultaneously or instantaneously. So it happens right there. Okay. Other practices are where, like the one I explained, where you present the data only without bringing the literature to bear on it. And the discussion in relation to the literature happens in the discussion chapter. But in some studies, in some practices, in some disciplines, as you present the findings, there's an obligation, and the practice of that practice in that discipline is that you discuss it at that point immediately. Okay. Again, you as a PhD student, you're choosing an academic tribe that you're joining. This academic tribe has got gatekeepers. It's got elders in it that have been speaking to each other for many years. They've set the norms, they've set the conventions, they speak in a particular way, they write in a particular way. If you're working in mixed methods, those people speak and they write in a particular way. If you're working in quantitative research, everything's done in a particular way. Learn your tribe's practices. When you learn the game, you can play the game better. All right. If you don't, and if you're dancing in a particular way in this tribe, and it's not quite the right dance, and you're dancing like the way that you dance in another tribe, they will say to you, we don't dance like that, yeah? We dance like this. So I'm putting it crudely, understand your tribe well. Now this tribe thing, even the term has got a colonial kind of connotation to it, but I'm just using it metaphorically to explain that there's a group of people that work in these different spaces. They're gatekeepers of what counts as the conventional way to do things here in this space. That's what you're trying to learn. Any other questions?
Yeah, I can't see a question here so far.
Hello.
Mafata. Oh, there's Mafata there.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for a very full presentation, Prof. I enjoyed it really. It brought a lot of light to me, and then also giving me a hope that at least the work will be done. I have always been in an issue about the theories that we use for our theoretical framework. Some theories seem to be very old, however, their application in the studies also appears to be relevant in so many cases. I don't know if it's a good thing for me maybe to have a fear of using the theory that I think is really, it was developed many years ago, maybe even before my own birth date. Then I still find myself using the theory, solving the problems of today's life. Sometimes I doubt some of the theories that I use. And then I have got a tendency, I know that my phenomenon is the one that will also try to determine the relevance of the theory that I have to use. But sometimes I do have some questions or doubts about the relevance of the theory I use. The second or the third issue is on relation to the number of maybe what are the expectations of the size of the document, the PhD document thesis.
Okay.
Sometimes I feel like
okay,
saying,
I can give you some quick answers to those questions there, right? So
okay,
with regard to the theories, right? Now, again, everything we do in the study has to have a sound academic reason or sound academic reasons for why we're doing the choices we make about which theory, etc. Theories are never static. Theories evolve and they grow over time. So they might be old theories or what we might refer to as seminal, seminal, seminal work, the founding fathers or mothers of certain theories that have developed certain theories. And over the years, people have used those theories and applied them in different spaces. I'll give you an easy, simple example to think about, right? That everyone knows. So if you think about Bloom's taxonomy, everybody knows Bloom's taxonomy, eh? What's the development on Bloom's taxonomy by his two students? So you have Bloom's taxonomy, and then these two students took it and they applied it in different spaces. And these two students were Anderson and Cathwell. They changed a few things around. They changed the nouns to verbs, and they moved the theory a little bit. In the world of theory, even the seminal theories, once they've been applied and people have extended them, they've evolved over time. Okay, so whether you're using the seminal theory in its purest form, or you're taking the evolutionary version of it, again, all of that depends on the research question you're asking. Okay, so what you wouldn't want to do is, as a student, is not show that you have an understanding about the fact that a particular theory has evolved over time. So some people are still citing Vygotsky. Vygotsky died in the 1800s on constructivism and social constructivism. But his theory has been applied. So he's like the founding father. Constructivism is this meta theory, the big overarching thing. You're now looking for on your phenomenon. The place to look is the literature. I'm trying to find out. I'm going to use AI to tell me who are the top 5 researchers in my field. Don't be shy. Ask it. It'll tell you. Okay? It will tell you. And then you're going to look for them. And then the next thing you ask yourself is, okay, now that I know them, let me see which theories, what are the contemporary popular theories being used to study the phenomenon? Because these would have been theories that have been evolved over time. You know you're in the right game, you know you're in the right area, is when you see the same names starting to come up in your readings. Then I'm in the right space now. Same names are coming up. Many people are using this theory, and then you decide whether you want to use that or not, and how you would adapt it, or bring another theory, other concepts to add to create your theoretical framework. I'm hoping that point was a clear point, that every study has its unique theoretical framework, that the student creates. And the student creates, it's like a framework, like a picture frame, eh? A picture frame holds the picture in place. It sets the theoretical boundaries for the study, the boundaries. And we know that in the world of frames, we can get long frames, vertical landscape, and round, circular, oval kinds of frames. All these frames, the job of the frame is to hold the picture in place. The job of the theoretical framework is to give theoretical parameters, boundaries to the study, so that the study, in fact, another way to think about it is that the theoretical framework, it anchors the study. It anchors it, and the way to think about it is like a ship. When a ship doesn't have an anchor, what happens? And the ship is stopped. When there's no anchor, what happens? The ship starts to move, right? It goes here, there, and it's like all over the place. But when you drop the anchor, the ship is steady. The theoretical framework does this. It keeps everything, and anchors it together with the research question. Okay. Anna, I see you got your camera on.
Yeah, okay.
Anna?
Okay.
No? Okay.
Yeah, I think Anna is just doing some other things there. Okay, so I think Prof, we have addressed that well. But may I then add that because my father also asked another question about how long should be a PhD study. So I don't know if you want to address
So-
that as well. Please address it.
Oh, you want me to address it? Okay. So now
Yeah.
if my father is asking that question, I'm worried. I'm very worried. That means my father hasn't done his homework. As a high-level PhD student, my father should know that already. Right? My father needs to go into the research and policy documents from the High Degrees Committee that explains that clearly what's the length, expected length, the word count of a PhD, word count of a master's, etc., etc., etc. It's unique to each institution. I can tell you about my institution. For a full PhD, it's 100,000 words. So you got to look, you got to go and find out from your institution what's the requirements. I had opportunity. I don't want to call it an opportunity, but in February, I examined a PhD from a leading university in South Africa, and this was like 250,000 words. This person put everything that they knew and they read about in their into the thesis. The literature review page was like chapter was like 67 pages. And then clearly you can see this person had no respect for the word count. And when reviewers and examiners get this kind of big, lengthy, oversized documents, they don't want to examine it. A big skill, an important skill that you learn as a PhD student is to write precisely, concisely, to capture the points accurately in an elegant way, and to work within certain limits. Writing like that is a high-level skill. Mafata, I hope you're going to go find out about from your institution. Is Mafata from UKZN?
Yeah. Yeah, I think then it will be important that you learn the language of your tribe. So in other words, your discipline will give you how many words you should have in your thesis, and then what you should have, whether you have to have 5 chapters or 7 chapters or 10 chapters, and then you stretch according to the rules of your discipline. So do not deviate from the rules of your discipline, because that may then lead to a situation where your thesis will just fail straight away. So thank you so much, Prof. Now that I don't see any hand, and there were some comments that are still there, I think we have addressed them as part of your presentation. And I can see that thumbs up coming through. So which means then people are happy, we can then conclude the session. So, but in concluding the session, we would like to say thank you very much for your contribution. And then we'll also plan around the issue that you have indicated together with Professor John Odara, that maybe we may take another level to add on what you have started, the again that you have started. Maybe in the next cohort, which is in August, we will see how we do, so that we can bring maybe the two of you as a team and bring that
Maybe the article
combined
writing,
presentation.
maybe the
Yeah,
article
yes,
writing workshop. But let me just check.
yeah, that's it.
I just need to check my program. Maybe a little later in the year.
Yeah.
I'll talk with you, Mary.
Yeah, because we have. Oh, it looked like Dr. Teresa wants to say something.
I've been voting but now. Can I ask you a question? I'd like to take the prof a little bit back. You know, when you were talking about finding the main idea of the author when we write our literature, and then at times I read the author's abstract, then I get the idea. But as I write the literature review, which section exactly can it give the precise idea of the author of the thesis slide? Is it because when I read someone's thesis literature, it's like all the history or all what do they say, but where exactly do I find their main idea? Is it where exactly which section from?
It's
Maybe
difficult to hear
I
you
didn't
well.
pick up that question. Can you explain to me? Can you just say what
Yeah,
the question was?
yeah. I think if you can come closer to your computer, because we can't hear you. Your voice is too low.
All right, let me try to repeat. I was saying, when I write my literature, and then Prof was talking about when we write our literature, we have to find the author's main idea. And then now, my question is, where or which section exactly do you find the main idea of the author? Is it because when I read the abstract, I can find it in a bit not full. But now, when I go to read the author's literature, it's a lot of ideas and so forth. But if I want to know, suppose Professor Koza wrote a thesis, now I want to find out what is the main idea of Professor Koza. Where do I go? Which section? Which chapter? Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So okay, she's saying that if she wants to focus on the main idea, as you indicated, that we need to focus, people should focus, writers should focus on the main idea of what is written there by that scholar.
Okay.
So now she's now asking to say, where exactly can I find the main idea, which is, in other words, a summary of the whole idea about this particular paper, which chapter or which section? That's what she's asking.
Okay, so if you look at the abstract, right, a good abstract you usually have the background, the context, the intellectual project, right? What's the big area that this thing is in, and it will point to what the problem is, and it will point also to the research question that the researcher is asking in the paper, right? And towards the end of that abstract, the researcher or the writer usually says the findings of the study are, and they point to the findings. So that's where you like you to find it in a very abbreviated form. When you start to read a really good article that's well structured, in the introduction, again, the author does the same thing, sets out the background, context, rationale, problem, etc. And the author will give a taste of what the findings are in the introduction. Okay? And it will remind you about what the research question is, and they will point to what the findings are. Obviously, in the findings section, they will present the data and the findings. Where you will see it a lot more clearly, you should see it a lot more clearly, is the conclusion. In the conclusion, what a good conclusion should do is should pull everything together in an article and remind the reader of what's the contribution, what's the finding, what's the main findings, main contribution of the article to the world. So it's not going to jump out at you, and it depends on how the articles are being read, have been written. You have to read through it.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really important that you read the whole article because you understand the context. When you're looking at the findings, you also understand the theoretical approach that was used to investigate the phenomenon that came up with those findings, the methodological approach and methods that we use to come up with the findings, approach that was used to come up with the findings. So just getting to the findings itself, not enough. Okay.
Yes, I think I agree, Prof, there that it should be we read the whole article so that because other authors have a tendency of hiding the main issue somewhere so that they force you to read the article, but others will just give it into the abstract as early as the introduction. But so it depends how people want to go about writing. I remember some other authors that have that tendency of saying, no, don't give away everything in the introduction and the abstract, so that you force the readers to read. So when they read, that's when they have the juicy detail of the main idea about this. So you just look at the situation and then see how the article is focuses. But it is important that you read the whole article so that you have the full context of it. Yeah.
Vicky, I want to thank you
Okay.
for inviting me.
Thank you.
Good luck to all the students and to the academics in the group. Good luck with your scholarship. And it was nice to hear from Sabero.
Yeah, I think I think, yeah, because we
Yeah,
have
Prof.
colleagues.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof. Awesome as always.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much. So now we may now allow you, Prof, to go now. I know the flu is still affecting you very much. I remember I started 2 weeks ago when we offered these workshops. Then you had it still. So now we can now allow you to leave, but for other colleagues then who are here and students will have to join us tomorrow, because there are other presentations tomorrow especially from students who will be presenting, because I've noticed that there are 4 students already who have already declared that they will be presenting tomorrow. Let me show you the names. The names are there. That Turu Dube will be the first one to start. Then we'll have Kaloki, who will also be the second. And then we'll have Zime, we'll have Lerato. So if you also want to join these members in terms of presenting your work, you will just email me. You will email me, you send an email to me. I will take it from there and add your name so that tomorrow you will then be able to present. In terms of the video recording, I will send it, because I will ask Prof. Maestri to give us his presentation, and then I've recorded the session. We will then have that video recording, which will come to your group email. So I'll send it via group email, the presentation and the recording, so that then we reflect on what we were discussing today. And then tomorrow, then we'll then allow colleagues to present theirs without having a guest speaker. Then we will then take it from there, because our next cohort then should be then in second week of August, where we'll have another guest speaker, and then we continue as usual. So I think then I would like to say thank you to Dr. Njie as well for leading this process, and then thank you to Prof. Mtiane for introducing our guest speaker. And then thank you everyone for participating. And also, thank you so much for everything. Thank you. You may take care now. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Okay, Prof.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's meet at
Yeah,
8
we were joined
o'clock
by a
tomorrow.
team from the
Thank you.
Catholic University of Kenya.
Thank you, Prof, and good night, everyone.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you.
Yes, good night.
Thank you.
Bye, Prof.
Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you from
Thank
Namibia.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll see on the video for more on our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.